Thank you so much for coming to the Cox Campus Town Hall event. We are so excited to have you all here. Today is Thursday, June 25th, and today the purpose of us meeting and talking together is to talk about how we can use assessment as a tool to really master meeting our kids where they are, knowing what they know already, and understanding where we'll go with the information that we can gain from assessment. So again, we're so excited to have you all here, and we're going to go ahead and get started. So of course, we have a little icebreaker. And these have been some interesting times. Some of us go back to our classrooms and we see the infamous March 13th date, the last time that we wrote on our boards. And life has been a little different. So we wanted to add a positive twist. What is one unexpected joy that you have experienced during quarantine? Leave your comments below. What is something that you didn't expect, but you're glad came out of this quarantine? For me, while you all are giving your responses, I would say I've started cooking again. Before, when my schedule was so hectic, I was grabbing food to go on the way home. Takeout was life. And then now that I've been able to quarantine, I tried a new food subscription box called HelloFresh. So I'm kind of stepping up my culinary skills a little bit. So I find joy in that. I don't find joy in washing the dishes after cooking, but I definitely have joy in cooking during quarantine. There are two guests on the call. I would like to invite one to share their experience before I introduce who they are, and then the next one can share what their unexpected joy is.
Hi, everybody. I think one unexpected joy for me was just being still. I think that, being educators and wearing the multiple hats that we wear, you're running from to and fro all the time, and just being okay to say that I'm not doing anything. And it doesn't mean I'm lazy. It really just means I'm refreshing myself, and I'm kind of giving myself that time to kind of just refresh and get myself together. And it was really nice to allow myself and give myself that grace to do that.
Thank you for sharing that.
I think one of the things that I've experienced throughout the quarantine time is just the ability to take a break and enjoy outside. I don't think a lot of times as educators we get to do that. And so taking a little recess every day has been a fun part of the quarantine time for me.
Permanent recess is an idea. I know we all miss the kids, and it's so great, and the students and our colleagues and just the school environment in general. So it's so great that we're still able to find joy and feel fulfilled during this time. So can't wait to check out your comments on how you all have been experiencing joy. But I'm sure that you're wondering, who are these people? So let's get started with the introductions. We love Bitmojis around here. So I'll start with the introduction of myself. I am Yvette Mans. I'm a kindergarten through third grade literacy facilitator at the Rollins Center behind me. And the Rollins Center is the professional development arm of the Atlanta Speech School. I've been here for 5 years now. This is my 11th year in education. I love everything lit or literacy, so my Bitmoji shirt says lit on it. And I also work in the capacity of a content developer for the Cox Campus platform. So that's me. I'm a New York native. Went to Clark Atlanta University for undergrad, and I like slushies. That's my random facts. Next up, we have Mr. Justin Browning. And Justin Browning is a literacy coach at Harper Archer Elementary School in Atlanta Public Schools. And this is his 10th year in education. He's no stranger to the Rollins crew or the Cox Campus crew. He worked with us under the capacity of a summer school facilitator. And it was so great working with Justin because we knew that, if we gave him a task, it wouldn't just be done. It'd be done like excellently. So Justin, thank you for your commitment continually to lifting up the work and knowing how to empower teachers to do what's better for them and better for their kids too.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Glad to have you here. And next up, we have Miss Nicole Forbes, who is a fellow New York native. Nicole is a special education teacher, and she's here at the Atlanta Speech School as well. So she's a certified Wilson clinician. She's got her master's in literacy, and she and I actually used to work together in the public school system And throughout all the ways that your professional careers can take a different path, we landed up here again together. So we always say teaching is very small. Don't make any teacher enemies because you're going to see each other. But when you have teacher friends that you can collaborate with and have this kind of talk with, that's the greatest thing. So everybody, let's welcome Nicole.
Thank you. Glad to be here as well.
So glad to have you. So this experience today is about part of our 2020 Shine Your Light. I think that literacy, in conjunction with a lot of things that happen in the world, give children an opportunity to shine from within. And literacy is one of the most empowering, just invigorating things. Like, I'm getting goosebumps, even though the air conditioner is a little cold in here, but the goosebumps are from literacy. And the light that you see in the eyes of your students when they finally get it, you know, it's like they have this expression like, oh my gosh. So we want every child to have the opportunity to shine their light. So what we're doing on Cox campus this summer is we have the 2020 Shine Your Light experience. And with the Shine Your Light experience, we have an opportunity for children to engage in really cool activities with read alouds and vocabulary games and research-based strategies to keep your children on track so that they're not experiencing summer slide or anything that we don't want to happen. So that's on the children's side. And then on the teacher side, we're doing exactly what you're doing today, which is being here and having conversations in town halls about how we can collaborate and kind of reconfigure, because being honest, next semester might look a little different. But how can we empower ourselves and pour into our toolbox to do what we know how to do and do it best? So we have this session today, which is on assessment and phonics. And then the next session, we'll talk about how to make instructional decisions based off of what you learned in assessments. Okay. So we're going to talk about why we're talking about assessments today. As we know, the National Reading Panel talks about the big five a lot. We have fluency, and then we have phonological awareness, we have phonics, vocabulary, comprehension, all these components that work together to create proficient readers. And we hear that term proficient readers a lot. So Justin, I'm going to ask you, in your experience and from your perspective, what do you think a proficient reader is?
So I think as a teacher, my definition of that has grown over the years. Originally, I thought it was a scholar who could just read the words on the page. Now I believe that it is, just based on the science of reading, that it is a scholar who can decode well and that can also make meaning of the text. Absolutely.
I like how you mentioned the science and making meaning. And sometimes I'm going to be honest and commit and say, when I was teaching, I'm like, why are my kids not getting reading comprehension? And I didn't realize that there can be deficits in other areas. Maybe they didn't have word attack strategies, or maybe there were gaps in phonological awareness that impeded their ability to decode words versus being able to make meaning of a whole bunch of text. There's so many different components of that. So I totally agree. And when I think about the science of reading, Nicole, I'm going to ask your opinion in a second. When I think about the science of reading or reading overall, I think of being able to decode and then also making meaning of the language. So Nicole, do you have any thoughts on that, or just experiences with children coming with prior language experience, or anything about reading as a whole?
I mean, I think it's really important to make sure that whenever you're getting your students, that you're able to kind of see where they're at and then be able to gauge what those gaps are and then try to meet it. I think sometimes, you know, if we see a child maybe and they're not understanding the phonics, we may just write off and say that they don't get the comprehension too. But sometimes you'll have kids who can comprehend very, very well, you know, if you ask them things orally, but then when it's time for them to read it, that's where you have the breakdown. So the goal is to have them to be independent readers so that they can also, that'll help push their comprehension along as well, you know?
Absolutely. And I think to our audience out there, I mentioned, of course, these are my teacher friends. So sometimes we get together and have teacher beverages or just teacher talk. And we kind of talk about things we see. And a lot of times, we talk about word callers. Sometimes word callers can fall below the radar. You know, when they're reading orally, they read fluently and with accuracy and with appropriate pacing, but then we find gaps later on. So, Justin, have you ever seen any word callers before, or students that exhibit those qualities?
I think a trap in all of our classrooms, right, is that we are immediately focused on those scholars that can't decode, and we think, oh no, we have poor readers or readers who are struggling. But oftentimes, I think we have those students in our classrooms who can call words and can decode, but then they lack the comprehension piece. And I love that we're having this conversation today, because I think using the assessments that we're going to talk about really helps us identify those scholars and identify their specific needs, and how we can best serve them in our classroom. So I think that's, to me, I think it's really, really easy to overlook those high readers because, oh, they can read, but they may not actually be proficient readers because they don't have the comprehension piece that has to go along with the decoding.
That's so true, Justin. I was going to say, because sometimes, children, they learn what they don't know, and then they compensate for it, so they know if I know this one part, let me raise my hand first for the part that I do know. So that way, when it comes to the next part that I'm not, sure of, that I'm free, you know what I mean? And they learn how to, like I said, compensate for those deficits that they have very, very early on. They don't want to be looked at as not being smart, or, they don't want to be made fun of by, classmates or ridiculed. So you brought up a really good point, that it's important to really kind of zone in, even on the ones that you think are strong, because there oftentimes are gaps in other areas that you're not aware of on the front end,
Yeah, and there's always room for growth. I think that language is such a vast area. I mean, once you have the decoding skills and you can recognize, syllable types and word patterns, it helps you access things. But I think there's so many possibilities. And so as a teacher, we think about how can we leverage that? How can we really meet children where they are? When I first started teaching, another confession, I was a cover to cover teacher. I said, okay, I teach third grade. Here's the basal reader. Start at the front page, go to the back page. And I had a universal screener that my school said, oh, Miss Mance, this is what you need to administer to your students. And I said, okay. And it would tell me, okay, these are the red kids, these are the yellow kids, these are the green kids. And I took that information and went with it. And so I'm smacking the hand of the first year teacher, but also wanted to share the information with educators today, because a lot of times we didn't know, like, how do you pinpoint exactly where your kids are and what skills do they need to know? So I know we talked about the National Reading Panel's Big 5 areas of literacy. And of course, there are vocabulary assessments out there that are amazing. There are reading comprehension and oral reading fluency comprehension activities. And there are, phonological awareness assessments. I think, Justin, what is the phonological awareness assessment you were telling me about?
The PAST assessment, it's PAST.
Yes.
So that's one of the assessments that I've used previously just to measure phonological awareness in my scholars. I think that it's pretty clear cut. It goes through segmentation, deletion, like the ladder of skills for phonological awareness. So that's a pretty easy assessment. It's also available online.
Cool. Okay. And Nicole, do you have any other assessments that you like that align with the Big 5?
Well, I mean, when I was working in public school, we used the Dibbles, a lot, because it came with, reading first. Since coming to the speech school and working at Wardlaw School, we've been using the IPI, which I think we were going to be talking about as well. And it really breaks it down from all the way from, kindergarten first all the way up. And it just hits and targets particular areas of, word study, how to break up a word. So it really can pinpoint exactly where the issues might be, wherever the deficits might be. And then you can gear your instruction to those areas, as opposed to just doing a blanket, covering everything, you know what I mean? Because then you can just focus on those areas and then strengthen the other parts, as opposed to just, like I said, putting a blanket over the whole thing. They may not need it, so it helps make your time more efficient. And that it's been great. I love it.
I'm glad you mentioned that. What'd you say?
No, I feel like the teachers are hearing all these assessments and they may be feeling like overwhelmed, like, because I think as teachers, we struggle with assessment fatigue sometimes.
Yeah.
Right? But I think that as we're moving into this new kind of era of teaching, right, where it's virtual and a little bit unknown. Like, it's going to be important for us to quickly be able to identify where scholars are and where we can support them the most.
Yeah.
And so I think like the battery of assessments that we're introducing today and just really talking through the drill down, I think we're going to talk about in a moment, like being able to identify those needs. I think that's going to be important for our listeners today.
Absolutely. And so, there are other assessments out there, but today we're just really kind of focusing on phonics, because in our work, sometimes I see that some school sites don't have decoding assessments, or they don't have something like the IPI. And that's really the thing that makes the difference. So I'm going to share my screen again. Let me switch my tabs. Okay, here it goes. So I'm going to share this with you all. And while I'm switching tabs, please feel free to leave your questions in the comments below. I know we're saying a lot of buzzwords, but if you have any questions, please feel free to leave them in the comment box. And then we'll have a question and answer segment at the end where we'll address those questions for you.
Yvette, while you're getting your screen up, I was just going to say, I know, like, just to piggyback off what Justin was saying about that feeling of being overwhelmed. But I mean, if we think about it in terms of the assessment not being something that's going to be looked at in a punitive way against us, as opposed, if the children don't know a certain thing, and using it as more of a tool to guide our instruction, then, it's more student-led as opposed to teacher-led, right? It seems like, we're the ones who are trying to like get this information from them, but it's really turns out to be student-led because you're using their information and what they know to guide the instruction to best help them. And, that's what's gonna make it easier for them and for us in the end.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I love the way you implement your assessments and always let the children know, this is not to gather any kind of bad information on you or anything. It just helps me be informed as a teacher. Okay, so here is the assessment drill down flow chart. I'm going to start with this is the one for 1st through 5th grade. And so we have a couple of columns and we show you what type of assessment it is, and then what skills they're assessed and how to use it. So if you want this document, make sure you're registered for Cox Campus, and you can just search drill down in the resource library, and you can have a very own copy that you can keep or print out or refer back to. So with the oral reading fluency and the retelling rubric, a lot of the times that's what we start with, or the universal screeners that we have. And screeners are really important because they do provide information. I know I said before it was just like the red, the yellow, and the green, but it also helps me to understand who's at risk for reading difficulty. But screeners aren't diagnostic. They can't tell me specifically in isolation what type of intervention plan or what type of instructional plan I should create for my students. So, screeners are quick. There's just tools that help us identify children who need more intensive support, and also who we can extend with and take a little bit further. So let's say you do have the information from the universal screener, then what happens? If you find that the oral reading fluency is below grade level, then that's when you want to give a phonics survey that we're going to show you an example of next. And then sometimes, regardless of the grade, you might have a kindergarten student or a 3rd grade student. It's all based on skill, not necessarily grade classification. And you might say, hey, okay, after I do the phonics survey, I need to scale back. Do they actually know their letter sounds? Do they know all of their letter sounds? And then while you're assessing for letter sounds, that's when you could do a phonological awareness survey, like the past assessment that Justin mentioned. And we have a free one that you can download on Cox Campus too, that will help you understand, like, do they actually understand things on the word level, sentence level, phoneme level before I go on to build letter sound correspondence? Do they have the sound? And then you could do a letter name assessment. And letter name assessments, I'm laughing because the other day we were all talking about letter name assessments, and I said, oh, we always have 54 on the letter names assessment. And so I'm like, all the uppercase letters, all the lowercase letters, and then the fancy G and the fancy A. So somebody please help me. Leave the correct name of the fancy A and the fancy G in the comments so I can stop saying that. And then also, here is a version of this for kindergarten. Nicole and Justin, do you want to share anything about the drill down chart, or like scaling back or pinpointing
So I
specific?
think for me, one of the things that as a teacher, but also as an instructional coach that I've realized in our practice is that a lot of people bypass, because as we want to increase scholars' ability to read more quickly so that they can be proficient, we bypass the phonological awareness piece of both instruction and assessment sometimes, or we just hit it real quick and then move on. And I think it's just critical because so many deficits come up in that area that later on impact their ability to blend and so forth. And so, especially in the younger grades this year, I specifically worked with kindergarten and first grade. We noticed that when we spent more time tending to the sounds before we put the print in front of them, that they were able to blend much more easily. So that's something to really pay attention to as you're assessing.
Cool.
Yeah, I agree, Justin. I mean, I taught kindergarten for 5 years. That was my first teaching experience, teaching kindergarten for 5 years. And I mean, stressing the importance of sounds and also making sure that the sounds that we're saying are correct. And I know you guys have a video on here as well about how to sound out, how to, say the sounds correctly, because when it's time to blend those words, if you're not clipping those sounds, it doesn't sound like the same word that you intended. So you have to be very deliberate. And I mean, being from New York, I have a, New York accent sometimes, and I had to make sure that I'm being, deliberate and being intentional with how I'm saying my words to the students, especially in those younger grades where they're listening very intently, and making sure that they repeat it back to me, and all those different little tips that are important, because like Justin said, it's going to be important for segmenting and blending, but then even further, it's going to affect their writing. I'm teaching upper grades now, and I can tell you it really truly impacts their writing later on, if they're not able to hear those sounds and learn those rules. It's imperative.
That's a good point. And I'm listening to you all talk. And why I'm interested in knowing your perspectives. Why do you think that, I know we're going to go into this in our next session, but why is phonics like important to you as an educator, as a classroom teacher, as an instructional coach? Why phonics? Because in reality, phonics instruction doesn't happen at every school site, or it, sometimes it can become one or the other. So how is it meaningful in your classroom environment?
I think I'll jump in and say that like I said, from teaching kindergarten, I think having that as my primary experience really helped shape how important phonics was go for the rest of my career. Much like both of you mentioned before, I think when you're in the upper, middle, like second, third, fourth, the focus is so much on them reading that, if that phonics foundation is not solid, that, we're just like, okay, we got to get you through this reader. We got to get you through this level. You got to get you to the next level. But you lose that because you're just trying to get them pushed along, right? We're trying to get them to grade level so bad that we miss the fact that, okay, we might need to put the pause on that, put the pause on the reader, pull back out the phonics. You can't read without phonics, period. You cannot, right, Justin? I mean, I'll let you.
I agree. I think the thing that I've pushed so much is like, phonics is the code, right? And so often I feel like we unintentionally as schools and teachers like hide the code from students, right? But so then reading becomes this mystery that feels impossible for a lot of our scholars.
Yeah.
But if we provide them with explicit phonics instruction with a clear sequence of skills, I think like that unlocks that code for them.
Yes.
So it's just the foundation for reading, because they have to be able to transfer and apply phonics in order to read proficiently.
Absolutely. And I want to say that even what you were saying just now, like not hiding it, right? And I think some of that comes from us as educators. I mean, just being honest, feeling comfortable with what we're giving the kids. All of us as teachers, we know teacher friends, we have teacher friends, we know that there's certain areas that it's like, ooh, that's not really my thing. I'm not really comfortable with that, right? And a lot of times it is that foundational stuff. If you've been teaching third, fourth, fifth, your focus is something else. And that phonics just seems foreign to you because it's not something that, is a strength for you, because that's something that's normalized for you. So I think making sure that going forward, that all of us, no matter what grade level you're on, that you understand that this is the foundation. Like there's no way around it. And I need to make sure that I'm proficient in knowing what these sounds sound like and not being afraid to teach it if need be, you know, even in 5th grade.
Whenever they need it. Like it just doesn't stop because, well, in 5th grade, you should have known this by now. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah,
right.
But
Not being afraid to teach it, but also like, don't be afraid to bring a friend alongside of you to learn it, right? Like, I think that's so important to us as educators, that we need to recognize, for the sake of all of our kids and where we are as a nation with reading, that like, it's our responsibility, because it didn't happen apparently in college, right? So we have to take each other by the hand and like help each other make sure that we can do what's best for students.
Yeah, and tying it back to the science of reading, I know you all mentioned the continuum of phonological awareness skills and how things work on a staircase or continuum, however you want to refer to it. So when children are not at that point, it's our job to meet them where they are. And I'm looking at the comments that are coming in. Thank you all that are leaving comments and questions. There was a question about, what does it mean to clip a sound? So when you're clipping a sound, when you're not clipping a sound, you're adding a schwa onto the end of it, and a schwa is just like a sound. So if I was modeling the sound that the grapheme or the letter P makes, and I was doing it incorrectly, I would say puh. P says puh. But when you clip the sound, you just say P says p. So P is a random fact, bilabial plosive. So bilabials, 2 lips, plosive, just pop your lip. You don't have to add an to the end, just give the sound that it makes. And that's so helpful to your students, because when you're actually blending words, they won't say like puh, ah, you know, they don't add an extra sound in there that would interfere with their meaning of it. So Nicole, do you ever find yourself having to reinforce for children to clip sounds when they're blended?
Yeah, definitely. I think not so much in the grade level that I'm teaching now, unless I'm working with a student, you know, who needs that decoding, who's still having the decoding deficits. But definitely when I'm working with younger students, for sure. Because the thing is that when you're talking to your family and your friends, the language is more relaxed, right? I mean, we know this, right? I mean, like I said, my accent, trust me, it's very different, especially even when I moved to Georgia, and the children say, why do you say ball and fall? And I say, well, I mean, you know, from the north.
Yeah, I'm
from the north. But yes, you have to help them hear it, because oftentimes they don't. You know, they're talking all the time, so they don't realize they're not clipping the sounds. And not for nothing, depending on what kind of instruction they had prior, they may have been taught the sounds wrong. I mean, before I started getting some instruction on through Foundations and through Wilson and Orrin Gillingham, you don't realize that you are saying buh. B says buh. We all said it. You know what I mean? Like this is the truth, you know. But as you start understanding phonics and not being scared of it so much, as we stop being so afraid of that whole realm, you start to really understand that you have to clip it, and why it makes sense when you're trying to blend words together. It changes the entire game.
Absolutely.
You know, and then we have kids who are like, I can't read this. Well, that's because I've been telling you buh all the time instead of buh.
Yes. So let's take it back to assessment, because I know I can't wait to our next town hall when we talk about phonics instruction, small group, and all of our tricks up our sleeve. Let's take it back to assessment. Justin, I'm going to toss my virtual ball to you. Tell me, what has your past experience been like with phonics-based assessments?
So phonics-based assessments for me, I've used a few different resources. One was just something we created in-house, which was a decoding survey. And we used Foundations as our primary phonics program. And so we looked at the words that they were teaching in each unit, and we created an assessment that basically just ensured that scholars could read words from the beginning to the end of the year, right? Like what was taught. And so we took a few words from each unit. And that works. I think that one of the things that I've learned in a practice that I'll be tweaking, you know, I'm constantly learning, is the use of nonsense words, which is what we use in the IPI, right? That nonsense words are used And the reason for that is because what I've noticed through the summer program we're doing this summer, we were assessing scholars using a free decoding survey that's available from Really Great Reading. So we were using that survey, and some scholars can read real words just based off of sight memory, right? Like they've seen that word so many times that they can read it, but they may not actually know the letter sound correspondences. And when they get a nonsense word, sometimes it tricks them up because it really measures whether or not they know the sounds that those letters make when they see them together. And so I think that's really important for our listeners to know is like, we don't just need to be measuring real words, we need to measure nonsense words.
And if I may, that's especially going to be important as the kids start getting older and their texts get more complex and they have those multisyllabic words, because some, if the rule is the rule, it doesn't matter how many, whatever way you create it, that word, it's going to apply. So that really helps you see whether the children understand the syllable rules and whether they can apply them in any text, in any situation. So
Right.
You'll have like kids who, once they know the rules, you could throw any book in front of them, any word. It's amazing to see them, these long words, and they're able to decode it. It's just amazing.
And I'm glad you mentioned the syllable rules or the syllable types, right? Because that's really what that assessment, the decoding survey, measures. It helps you be able to say, okay, here's where I need to focus support with this scholar. They don't know R-controlled vowels, or they don't know vowel teams or diphthongs, or, it helps you really pinpoint like how you drive your word work and how you drive your phonics instruction.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Or
And
if they've already mastered something, then I'm sorry to interrupt you, but if they've already mastered something, then how to move along also.
Right.
But yeah, Nicole, what were you going to share about nonsense words?
No, I was going to say, I agree with what you're saying. It's like, then you know where to move along at. And what was I going to say? I was going to say something about nonsense words, but I can't remember it. It's okay.
So
I don't want to interrupt you. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. Really it's like a flow right now.
I'll add something to nonsense words. Like you were saying multisyllabic words earlier, how it really supports that, because many of the syllables and multisyllabic words are actually nonsense words, right?
That's right.
So
that's right. Yeah. Mm-hmm. It's gonna come back to me at the wrong time. I know.
When it does, just give me like a big pause sign. It's back. Okay. So when you're giving a phonics assessment, what are some tips that you have for administering it, or around pronunciation, around setting the atmosphere for giving a phonics-based assessment?
I definitely say to familiarize myself with whatever the material is that I'm teaching. I can't stress that enough. And I know sometimes, because no one's ever throwing things at us at the last minute, right? But it can come to us last minute. But the truth is that if you can, have some foresight into what materials or what assessments, you guys will be using, or whichever ones you find on your own. If you have you're working at a school that is open to you guys choosing things that work for you, then just making sure you really familiarize yourself with the assessment you're going to be giving the kids, and then reminding them, I think just our demeanor when we're testing children helps them as well, right? I mean, having them understand this is not going to tell me that you're not going to get left back. They come in with so much anxiety about I'm going to be left back, using words like, this is going to tell me I'm stupid or I don't know anything. So just dissipating all of those anxieties and reminding them that this is just so I can know what I need to do this year. Let them know like, hey, I'm old, I always tell the kids, I'm an old lady. I mean, I know I look pretty young, right? But I'm an old lady. I can't remember everything. So I got to write this stuff down so I know what best way to help you this year, and it takes the stress off of them and realizing that you're just there to help them out,
I think there's some power too in just emphasizing the growth mindset with our scholars, that readers are always growing, right? And so that's important, but also that you're always growing, but also that you can set a goal, right? And so like next time, so if you did the phonics assessment, like let's really work on mastering R-controlled vowels, or let's really master blends, let's master so forth, like making sure that they know exactly what their next goal is to increase their reading ability. I think that's important.
Yeah. I'm looking at some of the questions and comments coming in. Jill from Facebook, she says, what is this IPI that you all keep talking about? And an IPI is just we're going to show you. I was getting the tabs together. But the IPI is a form of a decoding survey. So Justin mentioned the really great reading decoding survey. That one is like ingrained in my brain. I can just do it. I've given it literally.
Too. Like, I think that's the power of that one.
Yeah, that talks about like being like really succinct, and it was very manageable to do. You know, I've given it well over 500 times just in the past life. But I think that that's a great decoding survey. And if you have other decoding surveys that you use in your school, you can use that. We have one on Cox campus already that actually has a tool for progress monitoring, and it has nonsense words and real words. And then in the days to come, we will be having the IPI, but you're lucky that you're here now because you get a sneak preview of what's going to be on there.
The suspense is real.
I know.
I know, right?
So IPI stands for Instructional Phonics Inventory. So let me switch my tabs. And again, this will be ready for you all soon in our resource library. So make sure you sign up for Cox Campus. And somebody asked, what is Cox Campus? And it's a free interactive website with courses and resources that are based off of proven language and literacy practices. And we want to transform children's learning environment. So sign up for coxcampus.org. You'll see some of our faces on some of the videos that are on there. And now I'm going to show you a preview of the Instructional Phonics Inventory. So this is a pretty version. I'm going to take it back to the beginning. Instructional Phonics Inventory. And this is just a guide for teachers on the administration, the pronunciation, and scoring. So this assessment here starts with uppercase letter recognition, lowercase letter recognition, letter sound recognition. Then we go into the 7 syllable types. So Nicole, have you ever given the IPI before? Would you mind talking about it as I kind of click through and show them this format?
Yes, I have. And I mean, I teach 4th grade, so we give the IPI too, which is just, we leave off the uppercase letters, the lower level type of things, and we just kind of focus on the syllable types and the multisyllabic words. But I mean, all of the stuff in the IPI is pretty straightforward, and I think the most important part of that is going to be making sure that the kids are pronouncing the words correctly, and so that way you can score them accurately, because that will, again, like we said, later on, is going to affect their ability to blend those sounds. And the IPI, both 1 and 2, they don't usually take, it usually takes about maybe 15-20 minutes, depending on if it's a slower child, you kind of got to warm them up a little bit. But it's very straightforward. You just kind of move them along through it. If they don't know it, you skip it and go on to the next one. You can just tell them, if you don't know one, skip it and go on. So it's not where they have to feel like a lot of strain. You have to wait, forever for them to spit it out, for lack of a better word. But you can kind of just move through it very, briskly, so that way that they don't get stuck on the things that they don't know, and they can go to the stuff that they do know.
Okay, that's helpful. Justin, I see a light bulb coming up over your.
So Nicole, one of the things that I was thinking of on the admin side is that, like, when you give assessments like this, I think that making sure that like there's a training piece from the admin side that's involved, because while this appears simple, you're starting to see words that can become more difficult to pronounce, right? And I think that it's important to teachers, to feel comfortable giving this assessment and knowing exactly what they need to be listening to, because we don't want to mark things correct if they're incorrect, or so forth. But also, I think one of the things to keep in mind is that there needs to be some work on the instructional coaching side too, like really teaching the syllable types so that teachers are just aware, because especially when it gets to the vowel, consonant, vowel, I think, words, like that can be very tricky for some teachers to figure out.
Yeah, I will tell you, through the years, I mean, from the time that I started teaching and then growing through different, administrations, different schools, etc., I can't tell you how much more beneficial my instruction has been since I've been formally trained with a phonics training. So like, you know, not to throw out names, but y'all know some of the names, whether it's Wilson or in Gillingham or whatever the case may be, or whatever your building comes up with. But really, I think every teacher from K through 6 should have some type of certification or some type of training, some formal training that comes with this phonics, because it will change a child's life. It literally will change a child's life in your classroom when you're getting a 4th or 5th grader who is reading 2 years below grade level, and you can assess whether it's through the IPI or the past, and you can break down where their deficits are, and then know the syllable types really great enough. You know it, so you can teach them. You don't have to wonder about, okay, what do I do with this? So that's really important what you said, Justin, about the instructional piece and the admin side, making sure that the teachers have the support and that they have they're being trained explicitly on the skills that they are going to need to fill these gaps for these children.
And
yeah, really quick. Sorry, I'm trying not to interrupt you guys, but one of our YouTube viewers, Kristen Smith, says she uses nonsense words a lot with older students that didn't get good phonics instruction when they were young. So shout out to you, woohoo, Kristen! you're doing the work. You're doing the work. And there was another question that came in. It says from Facebook from our friend Michelle. She said, "Is this for grades pre-K through grade 2?" And so we would like to, you know, in pre-K grades, you would want to start with the letter names, and you would want to start with the letter sounds, and then the phonological awareness assessments. We do have a phonological awareness assessment on Cox campus, or you can use the past, like Justin mentioned, and start there. But even once they're able to get past those, then you would come on to a decoding survey like this one, which will be available very soon, or you would use another decoding survey. So just kind of like keep going until they reach a point of where you can see all the areas of growth. Really quick, we will have a pronunciation guide too. So Justin and Nicole, you know how you guys mentioned like how critical it is to pronounce words correctly. We'll have the pronunciation guide, the administration procedure, scoring guides, everything will be on Cox campus. And then you can also take the assessment course. Oh, yeah. And the assessment course gives you a lot of good tips on how to know when to drill down or when to keep going and meeting kids where they are. So Justin, I interrupted you.
So I was going to say that the assessment course, I was going to plug that because I think it's just helpful for the foundation of all of this that we've been talking about today. And also it's loaded with resources, right? And so like shout out to Rollins for putting this up in Cox campus, for putting this, because this is really designed for virtual instruction, right? Like where you could show this to a scholar on a screen and you could do it virtually. And so I think that this is really helpful for the time that we're moving into. The other thing I was going to say is sometimes I feel like our teachers, especially in the older grades, Nicole, and you probably heard this, get so frustrated with kids who, not really with the kids, but with the fact that we have low readers, right? But I'm not so sure that they're frustrated with the fact that we have low readers as much as they are that they don't have the instructional tools to be able to help them, right? And so
bingo. I totally agree with that, Justin. I think that that's really what it is, right? Because I mean, your job, when you go into teaching, is to want to help the students, right? And if it's something in an area that you're not comfortable with, or you don't know what to do, then that puts you in a vulnerable position, right? Like that means I don't know something, God forbid, right? Teachers have to still be taught, and I think that we should just get in our minds that we're ever learning, we're ever evolving. Just like our students are. So that way that even if I don't know something, it's not looked at in a punitive way, but that it's looked at like, how can I get what I need so I can best help my students?
Absolutely. Y'all, the questions are rolling in, the comments are rolling in. So I keep looking down at my phone because I'm kind of managing them. Okay, so somebody asked, can you use the instructional phonics inventory for children with hearing loss? And although I'm going to be honest, I don't have the answer to that, but I know that hearing loss can impact the development of phonological awareness and phonemic awareness. And I'm not sure the extent of the hearing loss. Teacher friends, have you all ever experienced a child with some maybe hearing losses or impairments that might have made you kind of like be really intentional or focused with how you gave the assessment?
I mean, I would think that depending on how severe the hearing loss is, that I would probably want to get together with the speech teacher, the SLP, and to make sure I'm understanding what the child is able to hear, right? I mean, I can say, depending on how severe or how extreme the hearing loss is, it would depend on what part they would be missing in the instruction of the test. So I would say definitely just talk to the SLP, because that's the person who's going to have, and the audiologist of the student and the parent, and then you guys can get together to create, a plan of action for that student.
That's really good advice. Justin, do you have any experience? You agree with Nicole?
I don't, but I do think, yeah, reach out to the SLP. I think they would probably know it of an alternative assessment if that didn't work, or they would be able to modify it if it needed to.
Yeah.
Work.
So, and then another question someone asked, so Nancy asked that question. I think that's a really good question for us to ponder on. And if we could find out more information and you can meet us back here on our next town hall, then maybe we can have some more solutions that you can implement in your classroom. And then we have another question from Carla on Facebook. And Carla on Facebook says, was the assessment course free? Was it free? And free is my favorite price point. It's my favorite. So yes, it is free. Cox Campus offers professional development, courses, resources, all for free. Even this session is going to be recorded for you, so you can go back and view it at another time. We'll have this video pinned to our Facebook page, and just you can sign up totally free. But what were your thoughts, Justin and Nicole, on the actual assessment course or any other course? I guess we can talk about assessments since we're talking about assessments. I'm partial to one course.
I think the assessment course was quick, right? Like it quickly gave me what I needed to know, and then it also provided all the resources. So it's really like a one-stop shop for getting an assessment program, I think, focused on the big 5 of reading set up in your school. So that was, to me, that was helpful as an instructional coach, because I feel like we're all the time grabbing for things and having to find things out on our own. And so just to have those resources right there ready to go. Someone else, Carla is asking good questions, because she asked if the IPI was digital or paper, and it's actually both, right?
Oh. Yeah, it's definitely
we've adapted it for this time period. So
yeah, I in the beginning of the school year, I gave the IPI, by hand with my students right in front of me. But when we had to do the end of the year assessment to kind of see where they're at, I gave it virtually using what will be available on Cox Campus in the upcoming week or so. So, the kids were able to make the transition very easily. It was honestly, it went by really, really fast. And, the colors are bright, it's engaging. It was really, really a nice transition. It was pleasurable to see on the eyes. And I would just want to say about the assessment, the assessment course on Cox, that it is very teacher friendly, meaning that it's giving you the information, but it's not weighing you down with a whole lot of, sometimes you get so much, the sides and not enough meat. You're getting just enough meat so that you can get it in a quick and concise way, so you can apply it, right away.
Well, thank you for that feedback. I think you made a good point, like the size, but not enough meat. Like, yeah, honestly, there can be no shade to anybody else. I don't know if I'm allowed to say shade on this, but really like sometimes you find a disconnect between theory and practice. Like there are people who can talk about what the research says and what's in the books, but as a teacher at heart, it makes me ask, like, okay, what does this look like in my classroom? How do I implement this? How do I make sure it's successful and measure this? I always think about that. Like, okay, this sounds great. What does this look like in my classroom?
Right. And that's important that you said that, Eva. And that's why I think that the course is so well, thought out, because, your teachers who want to still be able to come back in August or September with this, just thought bag of things they can use, having it be practical, having it be in real life situations and real language. That's what makes it not seem like this big elephant in the room and makes it not approachable, you know, especially if you're an upper grade teacher and phonics is not your thing. You can go on this course, listen to the whole thing, and, you know, feel like, you know what, this is something I can buy into. It doesn't seem unapproachable. And I think that was really good. I think you teachers will love it.
Thank you. Just what are your thoughts? You've always been like a phonics guru. Like, what are your thoughts?
It took years, though. It took years to feel comfortable. And I'm going to be honest with that. It's just, I think that, and going to different trainings. So there's never a time where I'm like, I've only arrived. I'll go to things. When I got certified in Wilson and we had like this overview, I went to it twice. I just wanted to make sure I understood, you know, and it's no shame on going back and revisiting things. I think that's something that all teachers should do, you know, because we're ever growing, you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
I think you said it. It's like we are ever growing. I'm learning still every day, right? So there's no shame in saying I don't know this, because anytime we can do something better, then we enhance the lives of our scholars, right?
Absolutely.
And I think like that's really important, because I've done Wilson trainings. We have a foundation trainer in our building, and all the time I learn new things from her, right? And so I think just being open to learning from each other and seeking out the resources in order to do the right thing, I think is important. One of the things that I was thinking when you showed the IPI earlier is like, we need to give that assessment to teachers, right? And like have them work through it together to see like where their knowledge is. Because I know in the assessment course, one thing that stuck with me, and I'm going to give a little teaser. Is that okay?
It's okay. Because a lot of people on here are saying they took it, and then other people are saying they can't wait to take it. But give
So
me
the thing that stuck with me was like diagnostic assessments, I think, can also be for teachers and teacher knowledge, right? And so it's like diagnostic assessments are the assessment of learning, where summative are the assessment, for learning, right? Sorry. See, I'm still learning. Diagnostic assessments are for learning, right? To help us figure out where we need to pinpoint instruction. And then summatives are the assessment of the learning, like after we've already got it, right? And so I think there's major power in like teachers taking this assessment to see where we can strengthen them, or even to identify like a self-assessment, right? Like look through it and do it on your own and see if you have any questions. And then reach out to someone. Like, we're all here and we're happy to help. So
yeah, Justin, you know what I was going to say? Something that you mentioned when you talked about summative. And I think that sometimes, you know, because there's so much pressure on us as teachers, that we kind of really get fixated on that summative, what's happening at the end, what did they learn, that we can miss that diagnostic piece and how important that is, right? So not being afraid to, hey, if you need to give this diagnostic more than once, you know, because you've seen some gains in this child, pull it out and, you know, help them see where they made that growth. And that way, you know, it kind of builds their confidence and then they buy into it. And, you know, we all know once the kids buy into anything you're giving them, now they're taking off, right?
I'm thinking real quick, Yvette, can I mention, so the drill down sheet, like one of the things, like using that, because I think we get so stuck on right? So we get so stuck on like giving all the assessments to all the kids, and that's when we experience that assessment fatigue, right? Like we feel like we're assessing all the time. But I think that assessment course helped me realize like you don't have to give every assessment to every kid, right? So like really start at the top and then figure out, like, I think that relieves some testing stress, not just on the scholars, but also on the teachers.
On the teachers.
So I just think it's a great practice to have and something to use inside schools.
And you know what I was going to say, Justin, to piggyback on what you're saying, even from an administrative, to have the administrative piece understand that, right? Because sometimes teachers feel afraid to, you know, use their own, you know, knowledge to say, well, listen, we don't need to give this whole thing. And this is the reasoning why. So really, you know, like I said, having the assessment course, having these documentations, you know, depending on what school you're at and what, you know, what county you're in, or what state you're in, you can use these type of tools and these type of the manuals to support your reasoning as to why we don't have to give all 25 kids in our class the same thing. They all don't need it. We did all 25 in August or September, but guess what? 5 of them don't need it. You know, 6 of them don't need it. And you have the basis as to why. because a lot of times it's like, well, why? You have the why. So you print everything off that you can and use it, because now you have something to back up your rationale as to why. So that way you don't burn out, the children don't burn out, and you can continue to push your instruction in the way that you'd like it to go for your students.
Yeah.
So, Yvette, can I add one more thing? Sorry.
Yeah, and then I have a question specifically for you in
Uh-oh.
the coach capacity, so get ready.
So I'm thinking about like knowing where our scholars are quickly in our classrooms, like once we've given the assessments. And one of the things we did at Harper Archer Elementary School this year is we started doing reading report cards in the younger grades, which really looked like just a one-sheeter of here's where you are, here's their reading level, here's how many sight words they know, so it's a snapshot for anyone that wanted to know where scholars are. And I think just a little hint to, like, if you go on the assessment course, it talks about data profiles. And I'm not sure if we're going to talk about that or not right now, but like a data profile is just a snapshot of where your scholars are based on the assessment. And it's just so helpful for anyone so that you can have that conversation with people in the building or other teachers that work with that scholar, but also just for the scholar too, to know where they are.
Yeah, absolutely. I was kind of typing on my Mac to see if I could find one of the examples, but I can't find it because we're running out of time. But you can find it on Cox campus, y'all. It's so cool. It's like a snapshot, like Justin said, and it's formatted really well. So it's a great tool for conferencing. You can make reading folders and put the snapshot on the front, and it keeps children aware of their progress over time. And then it also can loop with them to the next grade level. So teachers know, what happened before. Speaking of what teachers know, there is one teacher who wants to know, Justin. Well, actually, my apologies, an instructional coach.
Okay.
How do you think COVID will affect assessing students in the fall? So this would be tips from you as an instructional coach to teachers or other coaches.
So we really, at the end of the year, just being able to measure growth for us at Harper Archer Elementary was important. We know that milestones went out the window, but seeing as I'm focused with kindergarten and first grade, that wasn't really something we were concerned with, but we still wanted to know where our scholars were at the end of the year. And so that's where we did the literacy assessment. Ours was online. It was very similar to what, like the IPI. I think that the trick is one-on-one and really just scheduling one-on-one times, being able to have some whole group moments where you're able to prepare them for that, right? And so maybe we gave all of our teachers like a sample test deck that they practiced with their scholars so that it felt familiar. And then we also talked through like, what should parents be doing during this time? Like, because we want to know what scholars knew and not what the parents aided them to know, right? Just because that's real.
Right.
Every parent wants their child to be successful, right? Every parent wants their child to be successful. So I might whisper over the screen, like, shh, like this doesn't fit out, so they can do well. But just like setting those norms was important, and like giving the practice deck, I think, was important. So creating another maybe practice deck of nonsense words that. But I think the biggest thing is like making that a part of your daily, like the test shouldn't feel like a surprise. It shouldn't feel like a surprise test, right? Like assessing scholars should feel like a quick checkup, similar to like what they were talking about on the assessment course. A quick, like this is a quick checkup as to where you are and where we go next. Like what's our next plan of action? And so I think that that's just the important thing, is making sure that like it's not a surprise that they're seeing nonsense words regularly, because that's shocking to scholars, right? If I've never seen a nonsense word,
what is this?
And then
that's not a real word, and why do we have to do it?
I've had that. Then I see the word shaz, like I'm like, huh?
Real.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I think that's important. So I think, can I mention one thing real quick that is important to me? And as we're kind of restructuring some things at our school to where we're focusing, we want to get out of the weeds with reading. Like we want to be able to see clearly, and so we're focusing on the big five, and like everything we're doing is aligning to that, and we're taking some special steps to ensure that. But I think one of the things that teachers need to be clear of is like kind of that step of like, how do I teach for transfer of phonics skills, right? So making sure they're starting at that granular level of like the letter sound correspondence, moving into words, right? So then they're reading words with that letter sound correspondence. Then they're moving into nonsense words, and then phrases with sight words, and then full sentences, and then eventually decodable passages, right? Because I think what we do is we say AI bait A. Everyone, what does AI say? A. Okay, our phonics lesson is done for the day, right?
Right. And then sometimes there's no application
Right.
too.
And the application, the practice piece, like someone has said this, and I don't know who it is, so I can't quote them, but like practice makes proficient, right? Proficiency doesn't just happen. Practice makes proficient. And that has to be so intentional.
It
And
does.
so I think just making sure that we're intentional, that you understand like those steps are really important.
Yes, I'm loving this conversation that we're having. Justin, you mentioned one-on-one, and that's something we have to lift up. You guys, please give your phonics assessments. You guys and gals. I'm sorry, it's a New York thing to say guys, but please give your phonics assessment one-on-one, just so you can observe reading behaviors and observe things that you as a teacher might want to keep in mind as you're teaching. And yeah, so, okay, we're getting a lot more questions, but I'm looking at my clock and we're over time. I know we could go on all night. So what we can do, I'm like, I just feel like I'm just hanging out in the teacher's lounge. Our next live session is going to be on July 9th. Mark your calendars, tell a friend, sign up. We would love to see you and hear you here. And so what we can do, well, read your comments, but we will address the questions that you leave on this session. Join us back on July 9th, same time, same place, and we'll address any other questions. But then we're going to talk about phonics instruction and how to master small group instruction. So get ready. Get settled, bring your coffee, your water, whatever you choose to sip on, bring it, get comfortable, bring your snacks, and we're going to have a really good time. July 9th, we'll see you again. But before we go, please, thank you so much from the bottom of the Cox campus's heart to Nicole Forbes, who works in the Ward Law School. Thank you so much.
Thanks. It was my pleasure. It's lots of fun.
Yes, Justin, thank you so much from the bottom of Cox campus.
You are welcome. I can't wait till July 9th.
Yes, I know. It's going to be a party. I'm like, I'm going to have to fancy.
This is going to be really good. This is just kind of like the appetizer, but we have the whole meal for you.
The meat's coming.
Yeah. This was the salad and the soup. But come back for the meats and the heavy meal on July 9th. We can't wait to see you there. Thank you so much for your comments, for being engaged, and for committing to change the lives of children every day who depend on each and every one of you as teachers, educators, and world changers. We thank you so much. We hope to see you on the Cox campus in the community discussion board, and see you all on our next live on July 9th from 4 to 5. See you later, guys. Take care.